So, Dr. Morgan, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, it's a balmy day. We've had some 70-degree weather and some 50-degree weather in just a 24-hour time frame. And then it goes down to the 20s. So, I mean, I guess you know,
You can't
we're
keep
just
up.
like taking it in stride around here.
I just got in from walking my dogs and it is nice outside. We've got like 60, 70 degrees, clear skies. It's like, I can't
Oh.
believe this is February.
Right, right. And my job, I have to wear layers. So I have to be able to kind of peel when I need to. So it's kind
Right.
of fun. And you are more than familiar with a lot. Everyone, this is Morgan Taylor. She has a doctorate of a nurse practitioner in a PMP PC. She is a pediatric nurse practitioner and chief nursing officer at Archer Review. She is known simplifying complex topics, and Morgan has an extensive experience in pediatric intensive care, emergency medicine, and leads innovative curriculum development and mentorship initiatives in nursing education. And I had to give you all that hint because I work for a hospital and you see a lot of stuff that comes in and comes out. And I am part of that emergency medicine part because I'm an EMT. But let me tell you, that's one thing I think you get all the time, is when you're working in the hospital and you are providing these mentorships for these nursing education students. Weather plays a role.
Yeah, no, that's true.
It plays a role. Um, so just, tell me more about what you do and why education is so important to you.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me. And yeah, for me, I never intended to be an educator. This was not the grand plan. It was it was not what I was like, "Oh, I'm set out to be an education."
Yeah.
No, I wanted to be a nurse, then I wanted to be a nurse practitioner and work in the hospital. I love emergency medicine, I love intensive care, and that was really where I thought I would spend my entire career, hands-on at the
Wow.
bedside. And don't get me wrong, I still love the bedside. It is an amazing place to be. But what happened to me was around, 2019, 2020, I had been in my role for a little bit and I started to really begin precepting a lot of nurses, teaching a lot of
Oh,
nurses, taking on some of those bits and pieces as you kind of have been there for a little
yeah.
bit. And really, particularly throughout 2020, as we faced the pandemic in
Yeah.
healthcare, I found that new nurses really were not getting the mentorship and guidance that they needed. I mean, to no one's fault. We were all hands on
Yeah.
deck. It was
Yeah.
crazy times. I mean,
Yeah.
you're coming into the emergency department and you maybe even haven't had in person clinical rotations because
Yeah.
these students, they weren't allowed to come into clinicals in the hospital. For good reason. It was
Yes.
just chaos.
Health,
And
wellness, all the above.
unfortunately, it left these nurses super unprepared. And I think that moment is what sparked, okay, it's great to precept one nurse, but I can do a lot more if I try to address this at a system level. And I think about how are our nurses being prepared? Some things we're doing work great, but not everything. There's room for improvement in a lot of ways. And if we can address that, tackle that, make education fun, and really get our hands dirty, then maybe some of these complaints or issues that come up down the road, maybe we can address them further upstream. So that was where my mind started spinning and how I eventually ended up where I am today. Very, very passionate about education.
Let me ask you this, because we're talking about health and wellness. And when we make shifts in our occupational space, we go through stresses and strains that we don't realize with our bodies, like
Mhm.
even our mindset. I know
Oh,
we talk
yeah.
about occupational well, but I'm talking about that mindset part, that
Uh-huh.
that intellectual part. Like you're so into making sure that you have all of the CEUs, or that you're learning in the process. You can also become overwhelmed in the midst of it too, right?
Yes, I completely agree. You talk about the licensing, the credentialing, the all the ins and outs. There are so many moving pieces. And then,
Yeah.
let's say it's a brand new nurse going into an emergency department, the acuity, the stress, it becomes so real so fast that,
Mhm, mhm.
I'm holding people's lives in my hand and you have support, there are
Yeah.
systems. But I didn't feel like the systems I was experiencing that I was seeing were really addressing the wellness of that nurse, looking at it from a longevity perspective.
Oh, really?
I don't know what data you're maybe aware of, but right now, on average, nurses are leaving the bedside after about 2 years,
They
and
are.
that's
They
less
are.
time than they
Yeah,
went to
you
school to
don't
be a
even need
nurse.
data. Well, you do need data. But let me I'll say,
They're like,
let me back that up.
this is a
Okay,
problem.
let me back it up because I'm in the hospital a lot, okay, because that's what I do. And I got so used to knowing all my nurses,
Yeah,
hey, such and such, hey, such and such. And every
right.
time I walk into the ED, I'm like, who's that?
Who are these people?
Right. What's your first name? What's your last name before you sign?
Yes.
And at one
I
point, we
love
knew everybody's first name, last name, because they
Mhm.
have to sign, the certain
Yeah.
forms for us as EMS workers, and you would just say, "How are you doing? How's life?" and everything. But it's at first I thought it was because we were getting travel nurses. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Right. And that
But
was
it's
a
not
big
the
thing
case.
happening to fill a gap that is still there.
Yeah.
But because, in my opinion, we haven't totally set these nurses up for success by
Mhm.
laying a strong foundation, they then come into a very stressful work environment that doesn't have the supports they need. Of course, they're going to leave in 2 years. And
Yeah.
now all of our nurses have little experience, which has many domino effects down the line
Oh,
for all of
wow.
us, for patients, for all of the healthcare workers that we work with, and the nursing profession as a whole. It doesn't bode well for any of us.
Yeah, and what do you think your shift from being
Mhm.
always on the floor
Yeah.
as a nurse, but now you're more of a preceptor?
Yeah.
And there are variances on this. All
Hmm.
right. There's a lot of variances on it because that has its own issues that you have to deal with, that you have to work with, you have to work through. You're mentoring in top of the precepting, but yet you're still grading in a sense. You're
Yeah.
identifying the weak points, the strengths. What do you find was your biggest shift having to do that from being on the floor
Hmm. Hmm.
to now being a preceptor?
Yeah, the shift into being a preceptor for me was very gradual. I
Mm.
began my career in it was a pediatric float pool unit at Duke
Wow.
University Hospital. So I was trained over multiple areas of their pediatric department so that I could pop into different places where the census was up and oh my gosh, the ED is exploding today. We've got to pull some more nurses down there. I could be a little bit flexible. So that meant that my orientation phase was a lot longer than
Oh.
was typical if you were training in just one area. And it was
Mhm.
a lot longer until I was qualified to be a preceptor. For some nurses, it's like you're there 6 months and now you're training the next group of nurses coming in. So it happens
Wow.
really way too fast right now in a lot of environments. You're just not ready after 6 months. You still don't know what you don't know. It is a lifelong learning journey for all of us in healthcare. And I think really to adequately master that skill of precepting, it's something that takes years.
Mm. So, do you think your own personal wellness had to make some shifts?
Yeah, especially regarding for me, the two big like buckets of things under wellness that I struggled with and had to figure out how to put in place were
Mhm.
sleeping and eating because you're
Oh,
doing shift
oh.
work, right? So sometimes you're at night, sometimes you're during the day. People talk about the sleeping a lot. Very hard to figure out, when do I go to bed? How do I sleep during the day? People talk about that a lot. What I didn't feel prepared for was how to adjust when and what I ate. I was not hungry overnight because my body was like, "Oh, you should be asleep right now." You don't need to eat a chicken sandwich. Like, what's
Right,
going
right.
on? And if I did eat a big meal, I didn't feel well. But
Yeah.
then, I'm waking up while I'm trying to sleep because I haven't had enough protein to eat and I'm hungry. And
Yes.
that was a big juggling act that nobody talked about. And I think it impacted my wellness tremendously. Sleeping and eating are fundamental needs, right?
Right. They are.
The
They are.
basic
I'm glad
things.
you mentioned that. Okay. So, if anyone's watching this, Dr. Morgan is telling facts right here, okay? I'm not lying. Like, I work night shift, that's why. I can totally relate, okay? And one night, I mean, we just ran, 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 and I don't even think I think I had just a couple of nabs. That's it, like an
Sure,
apple.
I believe it.
Grabbed a graham cracker from the
Yep.
floor because I was like, "Oh, we haven't had a chance." And I was like, "I'm just so tired. I'm going to bed." I did not wake up because of the sun.
Mhm.
I woke up because my stomach was
You're
growling.
hungry, yeah. 100%.
It's a whole nother world,
100%. Yes, a new level of hunger.
right? And my husband looked, he said, "Why are you up?" I said, "Oh, I'm hungry."
I'm gonna
"Aren't you
get
tired?"
the
She said, "I'm
food.
tired, but my stomach is telling me you got to eat something right
Yep,
now."
yep.
And that imparts a lot right there on the wellness part. I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't think anyone would understand unless they work night shift.
Yes, and it's these basic things that, when we think about precepting, when we think about, really preparing our next generation of nurses, of EMTs, of doctors, there's all sorts of clinical knowledge and this and study that, but there's also just basic stuff like when to eat and sleep that you really need guidance on. And those sorts of structures and supports and mentorships are things that I don't think we focus on enough. And
Mhm.
part of, not the whole picture, but part
No.
of what I aim to do at Archer Review, in my view, I look at the nursing journey starting with the day you decide to go to nursing school. And how
Mm.
can I help you prepare for that? How can I hold your hand and be a resource and a touch point throughout
Wow.
nursing school, not just starting with your first day? I think if we start supporting you at day one of graduation or your first job, we're far too late. We really need to be thinking about preparing any of these students much, much earlier.
I like that. So is it an actual program that you have created? That you created?
Yeah, good question. Because you know what? It didn't start out as a comprehensive program. It started out with me, really trying to maybe do a little webinar here on something that I noticed people were struggling with. The very first webinar I did was on pharmacology. So looking at some different drug classes, things that I knew I didn't really feel like I had a grasp on as a new graduate. So we would do a little webinar and students would be reaching out to me wanting to talk. Oh, sometimes about pharmacology,
Yeah.
sometimes just about basic things like we were talking
Yeah.
about, getting some advice. What's your experience like on this unit? Should I look for a job here or there? All sorts of questions. So from there, I started with videos and webinars. I expanded into a tutoring and a mentorship program. Then we got students asking for help with tests. Tests are a big part of becoming any sort of healthcare
Yes.
provider.
Yes.
So doing practice questions with them, talking about study strategies, testing anxiety, preparing them for these high stake exams like your board exams, the NCLEX, things like that.
Mhm.
And it really evolved into now what is a very wraparound comprehensive program. So we've got test prep for you to get into nursing school. We've
Wow.
got mentorship programs that go throughout nursing school, test prep for your boards, and even on into graduate school. So, again, really a focus on the entire journey so that you've
Mm.
got something, stepping stones and guidance throughout that process.
Wow, I like that. I like that. Let me ask this one question. If you had one thing to ensure that that new nurse does not feel the burnout,
Yeah.
and that's important.
Oh,
Be-
yeah, big time.
hold a second. And I'm going to give just a little something on the side. Nurses sometimes have that opportunity. A lot of medical professionals have that opportunity of gaining overtime.
Mhm.
Okay. It can be attractive because it could be a critical needs, it could
Mhm.
be extra pay, it could be there's so many different levels of gaining extra funding in your pocket because there are shortages in the
Mhm.
medical field that the insight and correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
Dr. Morgan, the insight of like, if I don't help, who will?
Yes, there's a burden, right? You feel
Right, right.
responsible.
Right. So
Yes.
if I don't help, who
You
will?
will. Yes.
But we have to realize that we cannot fulfill every single spot that's empty
Mhm.
because we have to care for ourselves.
Mhm.
So, what would you give to that new medical professional going in
Mhm.
about protecting themselves
Yep.
physically and mentally?
Yes, because they go hand in hand, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that I would say is to find a mentor. Whether that is somebody you know from school, maybe you had a faculty member you really clicked with,
Mhm.
maybe it is somebody through Archer Review who you found, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's somebody you met on the floor.
Right.
However you connect with that person, somebody that clicks with, that shares your values, that's going to have your back, and be accountable to them. Have like a weekly check in and have it be somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. We were never meant to do this alone, and a lot of us are doing it alone. And we feel the weight of the world on our shoulders because of it. Like you said, Dr. Jewel, if I don't help, who will? I've got to do this. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
No, deep breath, back up. It's
I
really
love it, I
not
love
personal
it.
responsibility.
We always
It
say,
is
"Take a deep breath."
not personal
Mm.
responsibility. Deep breath and have a sounding board, have a mentor. I know not everyone is lucky enough to just have that perfect go to person in your life. That's what places like Archer Review are for. We've got a lot of nurses who love being nurses and they're passionate about helping you love it too.
Mhm.
So we will match you up with somebody who's going to be your cheerleader, your go to, your hype girl. We're all about that. You've got to have a person in your pocket. You can't do it alone.
I love it, I love it. And that was just one little question I had. It sounded little, but, people in medical field, y'all know it's not little.
Yes, it's not. It's
It's not
huge.
little. It's not li it's just protecting your space,
Yeah.
and that's part of
Yeah.
wellness. I mean, we have so many areas. We have emotional, intellectual, we have
Mhm.
occupational, environmental, and I mean, the list can go on, financial wellness. I mean, and that in parts, all of them are connected together, and so when nurses go in, they're really surprised by their first check, and they're like, "Oh, I got some serious financial wellness going on here." However, you don't wanna burn yourself out in the process because you still
No.
need to protect your space. You wanna protect your
Mhm.
mindset. You wanna protect your body
Yeah.
in it, and that's the reason why I had Dr. Morgan come on because I think that's something that is crucial, and one thing that we never got to, is that one of the big items, one of the big concerns out there is the safety of medical professionals who are working at the hospital and who are on their trucks,
Yeah.
from fire to EMS
Mhm.
and just nurses and doctors collectively is our sleep patterns. That
Mhm.
is one of the largest things that's out
Mhm.
there. And hopefully we can talk about that later, Dr. Morgan, because that is
Yes.
huge.
Huge.
Um,
It's
yeah,
something that sounds little that actually feeds into
right.
every other part of your wellness,
It
and if
does.
you don't prioritize it and do something about it, figure out what works for you,
Mhm.
everything else will suffer. It just will.
Yeah, I figured something out how I could stop that, and
I love
I
it, and
just
it's
'cause
different for
I
everybody.
tell you, that was
Like
the oddest thing. I was like, "Glad Dr. Morgan said it," because I have not had anyone else tell me, "Yeah, but, you know, my body woke me up."
yes.
Not because it was awake, because it was hungry. I mean, that was the oddest thing. It was so weird.
Yes.
What is one key thing you would love to leave my viewers? One key nugget.
One key nugget, I'm going to kind of keep this train rolling with where we just left off, was to not let the weight of the world bear down on just you. Like I said, we were never meant to be doing this alone. There is somebody out there who can kind of help shoulder that by being your mentor. But when we're talking health system, if you're working in a hospital, the responsibility lies with them and not you personally. And if you let them really take that over and take your wellness from you, you're not going to be able to pour from an empty cup, but for so long.
Go ahead.
So
I love it. You
you're
cannot
just
pour from
not.
an empty cup. That's the truth. Maybe we need to put that as a title.
It is. We don't always want to hear it, but at some point, your body's going to make you stop. So better to get ahead of it, really prioritize what you need to. That looks different for everybody. But let us help you figure that out and you'll be better for it in the long run. Everyone will be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan, for your time. I appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. Extremely knowledgeable information. And hopefully, today, when someone listens, they will understand that their health is a priority. Put themselves first, and everything else will line up. Thank you again, Dr. Morgan.
Thank you.